everyone. I'm providing another day of reflections. Here in Cape Town, I am still attempting to recover from whatever cold or bug that I got, but I'm feeling much better through much encouragement from Pastor Sauls and those in the delegation. I'm missing out on the visit to the township of Longo today here in Cape Town, where young people are actually going out visiting with a group of other young adults who have started a co-op and entrepreneurship program to help other young, inspiring entrepreneurs to build the necessary skills and receive coaching as a peer community to put their products and brands out there in the market. And so they're learning from a community development standpoint how to create such co-ops of support, but also the importance of entrepreneurship and what entrepreneurship can do to increase their earning capacity, but also improve upon conditions of community, especially when those dollars, money made from profits, can be contributed back to the community, more like a revolving fund or revolving investment to create more jobs as well as more businesses. So I'm missing out, but I'm definitely getting some of the pictures, and I'll be sharing that with you today. Last night we had an amazing welcome home dinner. This was our second welcome dinner that was hosted by the Pastor Saul's family, and it was very touching. It was very emotional too. Ever since we've set foot here in South Africa, we've had a very hearty welcome, and it's just felt like coming home. I mean, the food, the fun, the laughter, the cracking jokes, the sharing of politics, especially concerns about our current president in office. It's just been as if we were on the other side of the country and they were just waiting for us to come on over and join with them in communion, in fellowship, and in kinship. Last night, I think all of us who were there at the dinner really focused in on the kinship, the connection with Africa, and why it's so important to us. You know, when you're growing up in the United States, you're constantly told, like, history books start your history with slavery. From the time that you're brought here, to the time that you're held in bondage, to the time that there's a decision to fight to preserve the Union, and the preserving of the Union results in the ending of slavery, to the Reconstruction era, and then to the Jim Crow era, the separate but equal, right? And then to the Civil Rights era. You learn, what you learn throughout that whole process is not how important you are, not how important the contributions that you've made to your country has made it to thrive based on free labor, based on using that free labor to build and create commerce, to create an institution of wealth for the country. It's not affirming, right? That's what I want to say. It's not affirming. And so you learn about the civil rights and the civil rights struggle in our history, and what it took for many African Americans to mobilize, and then what it took for us to mobilize and bring on allies within faith, and then also bring on those allies who are non-Black to really push the moral issue of what equity means, what racial equity means, what social equity means, what economic equity means within our country. So, getting or rolling back to what I'm talking about as it relates to the connection, right? So, when you are constantly taught that your history starts with slavery, and then all the things that you've had to endure, and all the things that uh, you have been able to accomplish because of a lot of the changes in America, and then that America is better. I mean, it is better. It's better still than most countries in the world, and we still have our issues. And I'm going to talk about one of the ones that was brought up around the dinner table. You have a sense of wanting to belong to something, right? Although that you know that you are American, your birthright, because it shows up on your birth certificate, it'll say, for me, Janet Kelly, born 19 blankety blank blank. My race at the time in 1973 was listed as Negro, so it says Negro on my birth certificate, and then it'll say my place, city of origin, and then of course it's United States of America. And but I don't know my true origin. I know that my origin didn't start from slavery. I know that my origin didn't start from Louisiana. It didn't start from Texas. It didn't start from Virginia, all those other things. That's not my origin, you know? And for me, there's been a longing to have a connection to where I have come from, where my lineage has come from, and what my lineage may look like, and how knowing what my lineage is makes me whole. And being here in Africa, when I say it's been a homecoming, it has felt like a homecoming. It has not felt that you're visiting a foreign country. It has not felt like you're visiting a foreign land. It's felt like I see my kin, I see my family, and I am being made whole. And just the welcoming spirit that we have received as a delegation here from the United States has been totally overwhelming. And it's been overwhelmed with emotions of joy. It's been overwhelmed with emotions of sadness. It's also been overwhelming with a lot of emotions of what's next, you know, from this trip. What's the for me, what's going to be the next spark or inspiration in my life? And a lot of people put out those misconceptions that Africans don't like other African Americans, and African Americans don't like Africans, and it's just simply all talk. I mean, it's propaganda that I think a lot of us attempt to buy into. One, because we haven't gone into the unknown. Pastor Joe last night had said something that I thought was eye awakening, because you know sometimes when African Americans, or just people in general in the United States that are not a first origin to the United States, often say, well, if you don't like it here, go back to your own country, right? And Pastor Joe said, well, you know, the next time somebody tells me that, I'm going to say, okay, I just might as well and pack up my bags and come here to Africa. And to be honest, I feel that same way. I feel that same way too. But you know, where you come from is really important to provide the connections and the spiritual growth that one needs to do well. I mean, just just do well in spirit, do well in mind, do well in the physical aspect of our bodies. It's just, I mean, I can't tell you, and I think looking at the young people when they were talking about how this is home, how it's felt welcoming. Some of them didn't come with expectations. Some did. They felt really bad that they bought into some of the propaganda out there that Africa is just some barren land and that there's, you know, a lot of black youth with heavy bellies and flies, you know, walking around their face, their mouth, they're dirty, and to come here and see in South Africa and see black people in the majority, um, it's different. I mean, there's black people on billboards, marketing billboards. There are black people working in banks. Um, there are, I mean, the black people everywhere. But there's not only black people everywhere, there's Malaysians, I mean, there are Malaysians that are here. We're here in Cape Town. There's Asians here that we've run into in Cape Town, Chinese, Japanese. So, their outlook on what Africa looks like is even quite different, and I think they're enjoying too that the American influence on pop culture here is very high. From loving Tupac to listening to Kendrick Lamar to being a part of the Baby Squad, all of those things that they enjoy in common. But a lot of the interconnectivity. I mean, one of the things that was a part of this leadership group was how can we see the interconnectivity between South Los Angeles and Southern Africa, and even with them visiting Capetown. And I had posted one of the pictures you may have saw like the 10 housing huts and the land takeovers that the people within the township took over in order to create land and space for them to live. Although it may not look like the best of conditions, and although it may for us look like abject poverty, there's food growing there. People are tilling the ground, they're tilling the land, and they're planting, and they're sharing in the building, or they're sharing in the growing of the food, and they're sharing in what gets brought into the township with others. You're just you're constantly sitting there amazed, and oftentimes you're perplexed that why have you adopted so much of Western kind of like practices and principles that are so individualistic, right? That are very individualistic and doesn't incorporate the caring and the taking taking care of your brother, right? The need to take care of your brother, the need to take care of your community, because as a whole, we're all in this together. And you'll see a lot of the billboards here that say stronger together. And I believe that we are stronger together. So I'm going to wrap up because I don't want this to be like a 20-30 minute video. But one of our dinner discussions was around how here in South Africa, especially here in Cape Town, apartheid ended about 27 years ago. And I'm not a historian, so whoever's a historian, you could correct me, but I know it's been less than 30 years. So I'm saying 27 years because I believe it ended in 1991, and then the transition in the government and all that other stuff happened around 92, 93 until Mandela was voted in as president in 1994. And so right now there is a move around, and I'm going to use the term affirmative action because I don't really know the term that's here in South Africa. And that move is basically um, using kind of like the ideology of affirmative action, that blacks are considered considered or looked at um, for employment opportunities and other opportunities because they have been disenfranchised in the past. And because of that, there is what's called a classification in here in South Africa of colored. So many colored, those who are identified as colored, are not black enough to qualify for any of the opportunities that this affirmative action would afford them because they're not black enough and they're not white where they would have the privilege to kind of walk into a lot of opportunities. So they're feeling like they're stuck in the middle. And so I was asked, because around the dinner table I was talking about operating in duality. You know, when you're in the United States, and you're black, and I'm just speaking from my own personal perspective of this, not for black people across the country. I constantly feel that I'm operating in my duality because when I am in white spaces, I have to be 2 times better, 3 times better. I have to articulate extremely well. I have to use the King's English. I have to use that language. I have to present myself and reaffirm myself too when I'm in those spaces of my intellectual ability, my thinking abilities, my decision making abilities, all of those things that are talents and traits that I have in those spaces, so that I am able to maneuver, I'm able to soar, and I'm able to thrive in those spaces, even with the hue of my skin. But at the same time, I have to, at times, turn off that person that operates in white spaces because I'm around other people that I share in kinship, right? And the way that we communicate, the way that we engage, oftentimes quite different. And I have to ensure within myself that, one, I'm expressing the same level compassion and interconnectivity with my my community of kinship, and I often say that those who cannot operate in their duality oftentimes cannot find the success in the United States that they want unless they can master it. And they were a bit surprised by my talk about duality and how that happens here within the United States. And they wanted to know, how do Americans feel about affirmative action and colorism, especially colorism as it relates to does colorism affect how you gain access? Does colorism strip you of your cultural identity? I mean, what is it like for people who are considered biracial? I mean, do they identify as black? Do they identify as white? So it's all these things that we were able to talk about at the dinner table. That was so, it was just so enlightening just to share our perspectives, and even how we have intersectionality on that level about race, affirmative action, post apartheid, post civil rights, where you're going from here, where you're going from there. And last but not least, I'm going to mention this, and I think I've mentioned it a couple of times. I believe people here in South Africa really worry about us in the United States. I mean, really worry about Black lives here. because it came up in the dinner conversation, um, about how we felt about being targets for being targets because of the color of our skin, because they don't experience that here, where they're in the majority. Of course, we're in the minority, in the United States, but they really expressed concern and they wanted to know how we felt about that. And when I talked about, for me, as a Black mother, how I really fear for my kids, but I feel fear most for my my Black young sons, because I know that this world is not so kind, and I know that no one's going to perceive them as the fun loving young men that I know them as. And even my son, who's had encounters with LAPD, and one that could not have been a great one. uh I mean, my greatest worry for them is for them succumbing to someone who doesn't know who they are as people, and who will be quick to make judgment and determine that their life won't matter and take them from me. Um and I pray to God, believe me, I pray to God every day. I pray so hard for my kids. I pray that the Lord keeps them and protects them, and put a hedge around them, so that, I am not one of those mothers who was standing there on TV crying, bawling my eyes out because I've lost my son unjustly. Because I could tell you, I don't think I would be one of those moms that would be so forgiving. I don't think I would be one of those moms who could walk around and say, I just don't think I could be one of those. I don't. And the Lord will really have to work with me in my heart. But I couldn't. No, not for me, not for my kids. And I love them to death. I really do. They are just my heart and soul. But we talked about that, and the Black Lives Movement, and how they are concerned about our lives, and how we feel about law enforcement, and whether law enforcement there is getting better, and how they feel coming to a country like the United States, where they would be walking into certain communities and possibly have contact with law enforcement, or even have contact um, with others who feel the right that they could justifiably kill a Black person and then walk away unscathed. So we talked about that, and all I could just say is wow. I mean, all I could just say is wow. And can I tell you this? I mean, the concern about our country and our president is also real. Um, and I'm not going to really go into that any much deeper, because I just don't want to give him that much airtime. But I could tell you, in some places here in Africa, and then you go to some of the coffee shops, or you're talking to people, I mean, that's one of the things they ask about, and they have specific feelings as well. But I want to close with this, that interconnectivity is important, kinship is important, and we have to help our young people affirm who they are. We have to let them know where they came from. We need to let them know that their history does not start with slavery. Even for a lot of them, their history doesn't even include indentured servitude. I think we need to reevaluate education, but I also think we really need to focus a lot on healing circles, community circles, so that we can really talk about these things in our interconnectivity to Africa, because Africa is home. Africa is really is our home. United States is our home too, right? Because we were born there. And I can tell you, I love all my friends in the United States. I love my Black friends. I love my white friends. I love my Asian friends. I love, I just love all my friends. I love my Jewish friends. I love all my friends. I love you all with the love of the Lord because I've known you all my life from birth up until now. But I don't want to say but, because when you say but, you negate everything. And I want to include Africa because Africa is home too. So I'm going to end with that. I want to thank you for sitting with me for my reflections. It was longer than what I hoped for, but I really hope you enjoy and one day set aside some funds. And I pray that the Lord would make a way for you to come visit and connect with home.